Right, Omar Abouelkhair, and he's with us today. We want to thank Omar Abouelkhair for coming all the way from Rutgers University. He was one of the youths that was shot. He was actually shot twice or three times there at the Rubber Square. He had his head and arm had received bullets. He was arrested, and he went to the hospital. And when they found out that he was American, I think this is noteworthy, the hospital said, "We never shot you, we don't know who you are, would you please leave, go to the airport and get out of here." So I think it's important that he tells his story on this particular panel, and so I give you Omar Abouelkhair.
All right, first of all, I want to thank each and every single one of you for being here. You're truly doing, God's work by coming out and supporting really the truth. And it's really important that we do come out to things like this and we show our support, because we have a moral obligation to sort of uphold this idea of justice and to really support democracy wherever it is. Because coming from an American background, I'm just going to go right into my experience. I'm not really going to get into the politics. I'm just going to tell you what I saw, what I observed, and what that did for me. So about a year and a half ago, I was in Egypt. I was your average, 19-year-old teenager. I was stupid, I was foolish. I had absolutely no perspective of politics. I didn't care for politics. I didn't care who was president. I didn't care what was going on. All I knew was that there was a revolution in 2011, and the January 25th revolution. All I knew was that had happened, and I felt like it was a positive direction for Egypt. But that's as far as I was really concerned about Egyptian politics. And it was when I was over there on vacation that my mother had actually, she insisted on going out to these protests, these pro-Morsi protests, to show our support for the democratic process in Egypt. And at first I didn't really understand it. As somebody who isn't living here, as somebody who was really not a care in the world, I really didn't understand why she had to do that. What was the importance behind going out to protest? I seen it as even pointless a little bit. And it wasn't until that she actually insisted and really forced me to go with her originally. And it wasn't upon actually going there and being among these people at these protests that I realized that, and I swear to God, these are some of the most beautiful people I've ever seen in my life. They're the most honorable, the most dignified, the most truly beautiful personalities that I've ever seen in my life. And these are people that really celebrated me being there, really being nobody. It was just, they were so happy to see people from different countries that were there supporting them, supporting the democratic process, taking a stand with the justice that they were pursuing. And I was with these people, and they really I can't really describe how really it changed me, just seeing these people. It totally changed my perspective on life. Just seeing people to that magnitude of dignity and honor, and really the most beautiful personalities. And when I actually seen these people, I knew that there was absolutely no way that these people were on the wrong path, that these people were extremists, that these people were terrorists, as the government says. And I continued to go out to these protests, and after I went to Rubber Square, I attended the demonstrations over there, and I was there the day of the Manassa when over 200, 300 protesters, peaceful protesters died. I happened to actually be there standing at that day at the Manassa itself. So it was just seeing that happen to the people that really carried me on their shoulders and celebrated my presence, that totally shocked me. It was like it was like a state of grieving, just knowing that these people, these beautiful people, were just massacred in the streets without any type of regard for human rights or any type of due process. And it was upon seeing that I became even more steadfast and determined to really come out and to continue to support the democratic process in Egypt, and to really condemn the violations of the Egyptian government. And after, on August 14th, the Rubber Square incident happened. As you guys have heard, over 1,000 protesters at least were killed that day. And I was in another city at the time, and I heard about that happening, and it really totally destroyed me on the inside. It just totally destroyed any type of hope that I had for really the current Egyptian regime. Like, it really, like, I can't really describe what it was like, but as you can imagine, it was a very tragic stage, I guess, in my life, and I was scheduled to leave Egypt 2 days after that, and it was the last day that I was supposed to be in Egypt. It was a Friday. I was leaving that night at dawn, and I heard about a protest in a nearby city that I decided that as kind of like a last-ditch effort of support, the last thing I could do is I could just go out and just show one last time, participate with these people in a protest. And on our way, I took local transportation, and when I arrived at the protest, the street that I was supposed to be in, I seen that it was completely blocked off by security forces, and you were just met by a cloud of just tear gas, just immediately hit you as soon as you get into the region, like still 4 or 5 blocks away. And I decided that I was going to get into the actual street where the protesters were. So I started going through all these side streets to try to get in there, and you've seen that the security forces had completely blocked off the side streets, not allowing anybody inside, so you don't know what's happening to the people on the inside. You don't know nobody on the outside could see what's happening to them in there. And it wasn't through like a maze of side streets that I was actually able to get to the protesters. And when I actually reached their position, I found myself immediately in what seemed like a war zone. Like I walked through the side street, and I was in the middle of the protesters. And on my left, about 2 blocks out, there was probably a mob of no less than 300 security forces, army personnel, thugs who seemed to be like cooperating with them, and just local police, and they were just kind of standing there 2 blocks out, just shooting indiscriminately into a crowd of women, children, young teenagers, senior citizens, people who had absolutely nowhere to go because they were trapped. They were really cornered into the street, and they were just being shot at indiscriminately. And I remember standing there, and I really couldn't believe that this is happening. Like, coming from somebody who grew up in America, and like with the rights that we have over here, and then going to a place like that, and just it was a very surreal experience. I really couldn't believe that something like this could be happening in today's world, especially in 2014. And I remember standing among these people, and it was very difficult to just really understand like what exactly was going on, because as you're standing there, there's people to your left and right who every now and then someone would just get shot, boom, drop, and then they'd be carried away. Like, you don't even know where they're even going to be carried to, because there's no way out. And we're over here just standing here. There's women and children. They're kind of just hovering in a corner in the middle of the street, and they have absolutely nowhere to go. Infants, like like what do you do? Like, who could you go to when it's the government that's doing the killing? Like, who are we gonna call? We're gonna call the police? Like, who are you gonna go to when the government, your own government, is the one that's coming out and killing you indiscriminately in the streets? So I stood there, and I decided to stand in the front of the protesters with the young teens who were throwing rocks back in kind of a futile attempt to hold off the security forces. And as I was standing with them, about, I think, like 30, 45 minutes or an hour into the experience, I can't really tell, I was actually shot myself. My arm went numb out of nowhere, and my head sort of started, like, it felt like it was ringing. And I turned around to see what happened, and there's just blood gushing out of my arm, and my whole face was immediately covered in blood. And I'm in a country where I don't really know the city that I'm in. I don't really know many people. So I just started like jogging. I have no idea where I'm going, but I had nowhere to go. Like, I really had nowhere to go. And I made my way by some miraculous path. I made my way out of those side streets, and I ended up flagging down a random motorcycle that was passing by, and I asked this guy to give me a ride to the hospital. And you could see him hesitate sort of to give me a ride, because he knew I was a protester, and he knew if he was stopped with me that he would probably be sent off to jail or something simply by associating himself with a protester. But I really, like, I guess his sympathy got the best of him, and he actually allowed me, he told me to get on the motorcycle, and he gave me a ride to the hospital. And it really gives you insight at like his reaction upon getting to the hospital. Like, really, defines really the situation in Egypt. Like, I'm somebody who's been shot, I'm over here compressing like the blood that's gushing out of the random parts of my body. I still had no idea what I was even shot with. I had no idea what a fartouche was at the time, which was more like a buckshot. And he drops me off like around like the corner of the gates of the hospital, and he's like, listen, you're on your own from here. And then he just lets me off because he didn't want to go anywhere near the hospital. And then as I walk to the gates, I see security forces standing at the gates, meeting just everybody who's coming in, because they knew that when they attacked the protests, they knew people were going to be shot, people were going to be killed, and the first place they were going to go was the hospital. So, according to their plan, what better place to sit there and wait for protesters than the gates of a hospital? And I wasn't met with a medical team or some trauma team, as you would expect with somebody who's still bleeding. I was instead met with a team of investigators, some army personnel, and some security forces who instead proceeded to take down my information so that they could book me and send me off to jail with absolutely no medical attention, with absolutely no charge, just nothing. Just, you're a protester, that's it, you're going to jail. Shot or not shot, bleeding to death or not, it didn't matter to them. What mattered was just this was somebody that we were going to send off to jail with absolutely no respect for any type of humanity. And they sat there and took my information for 10 to 15 minutes. And then it wasn't until then that I actually let them know that I was an American citizen. And it really came up randomly in the discussion. They asked me what college I went to as like a part of their information, I guess, that they were taking from me. They asked me what college I went to, and I told them I go to Rutgers University. And then he hesitated for a second. He was like, where's that at? And I told him it was in New Jersey. And then that's when he realized that I was an American citizen. And then as soon as that happened, you see him pause for a second, and then they were like, all right, 1 second, we'll be right back. And then they go speak to the higher-ups, and they come back, and then after they come back, they're like, listen, we don't want any trouble. I'm sure you don't want any trouble. Just take yourself and go home. Again, this is from the front door, like pretty much of the hospital. I haven't seen a doctor. I haven't received a Band-Aid, not even a gauze pad. No type of medical attention, and they're just sending me off, just, you're lucky you're not going to jail. So I left at that point, obviously, and that was my last day in Egypt anyway. And I ended up leaving the country later that night, boarded the plane, still haven't received any medical attention. And it wasn't until the next day that I actually got to America that I actually went to a proper hospital. And I was met by a trauma team, actually, and they told me that they can't really operate because it would cause way too much nerve damage to try to get all the pellets out, because there's at least 30 pellets, I think, in my body. So they told me that you're just going to have to live with it for the rest of your life. And I sort of stayed a year, like kind of dormant, not really active. Really, I participated in the protests here in New York with the organization IDHAR, who I actually happened to be attending, but I participated in these protests. And that's about it. I didn't really talk to nobody. I didn't really like reach out, try to make my story heard or anything, simply because I felt like I was just a statistic. I was one in thousands. I felt very insignificant. And it wasn't until the organization Egyptians Abroad for Democracy Worldwide that they had convinced me to actually try to pursue some type of legal action and to try to make my voice heard. And it was really upon contemplating that concept that I realized that it's an obligation upon me to try to make my voice heard, to try to pursue legal action. Because if I don't care about my rights, then there are thousands and thousands of people in prison in Egypt and buried in their graves who will never have the opportunity to make their voice heard. They will never have the opportunity to sit in front of you here today and to tell you what they witnessed and what happened to them. They'll never see that opportunity. So for somebody who actually has that opportunity, it's not just an obligation for my own rights, but it's for their rights that I have to come out and I have to make my voice heard and I have to tell you my story just so you know what they're witnessing over there. And that's practically it. I came here and I've spoken to a few senators and a few congressmen, and I went to my attorney general trying to pursue an actual criminal case against Abdel Fattah and Sisi and Omar Abouelkhair. And I submitted my case, and as of right now, it was pending for a while, and then now the Department of Justice is really trying to halt it, to try to bring it to a stop, probably for the political international foreign relations or whatever might be their perspective on it, but they're really trying to stop it. So I spoke to a few senators, and I'm trying to reach out to a few human rights organizations to try to bring public attention to the matter, to let them know that we're not gonna stop. As Omar had said earlier, we're gonna bring these people that committed these crimes accountable, no matter what is the cost.